about The Rehearsal,
Season 2,
episode 4.
to me.
But more importantly, to me. Before we get into the app, I believe I had some homework. We can start with homework number 1 that I had, which was
Did you read the whole book?
that was homework.
Sully?
That was homework 2. Hold on. Homework 1 was Evanescence and what she thought, and you were so kind as to send me an article about it.
It's so cool. She has watched.
She has watched
The
the
season.
episode. She's watched the season. I think she'd already watched them before.
That rules.
My favorite part about her response is like they asked, and I immediately was like, "Yes, I have. This idea sounds absurd, and I'm in." I also learned now that this song is, peak coming back now, not just because of this episode, but just because it's been like 20 years since that song came out. That the lead artist did not want the rap piece of the song, and the label was like, "No. Metalcore is where it's at right now. You have to do this." And I think they were right, but also wrong. It absolutely was the thing at the time, and it probably did get that song a lot more listens than it needed. But basically all her comments were that she loves it. It's great timing because she has a new song out with Halsey. And shout out to Chris DeVille, the staff writer of Stereo Gum, who did the interview, or at least summarized it, when he said, when Amy Lee said, "I guess we'll never know." And he was like, "Well, I mean, we could. Sully's not like, he's not a dead. We could find out." I don't think Sully is the type of character to give this show the light of day. He seems much too serious, and I know that because I read his book.
Fuck yeah. Okay, let's go. All right. Tell me, how was the book?
Now by read I meant listen to, obviously.
Okay.
Narrated by him.
That's fine.
I made a few notes about it. The book was pretty good. It was short, which I think is great. I think it was like 9 hours long listening. So I think that's an appropriate amount of time for a biography about an incident.
How many pages is that?
My guess is it's probably 200 and something. Okay. That's just a wild guess,
that's
though. It's probably actually less, but he narrates it quite well. You can tell he's a very calm individual. He comes across that way a lot when he's reading the book. The book is very focused on safety. This dude is Mr. Safety. No joke. He talks about it. The whole thing is like a summary of how he came to this incident, the landing on the Hudson, and what led up to it, and all the decisions that led up to it, his time in the Air Force, his time as a kid, his relationship to his adopted kids.
He's got adopted.
He has
kids,
2
too.
adopted daughters who are tremendous human beings as well, and it's very interesting that he talks about the differences between the 2 of them a little bit.
Is that from the multiple marriages, or
He does not talk about the multiple marriages much. He really only kind of talks about the second one.
Okay.
The second thing was the flight with the teenage girl. Not as erotic as Nathan Fielder comedically made it to be. He does mention, he's like, "I am a teenager. I am next to this woman who I'm brushing arms with, and our legs are touching because there's no other choice because we're in this very tiny," I believe it was a Cessna 150, which, if I'm correct, is a tail wheel, which is pretty cool in its own right. And it is a 2-seater and a 2-seater only. The kind of 2-seater that I think if you and I were in it, we'd be over the weight capacity. It is a very, very small plane.
Does he say explicitly if he got an erection?
He does not. He never mentions that, and he doesn't even mention it in a I don't think he even uses the word arousal. He's just like, "Look, I'm a teenager. You can imagine how distracting it was to be in this airplane."
Mm-hmm.
But he also talks about explicitly how he had to focus on the flight, and he didn't let this distract him because he took it very seriously. And he, from an early age, talks about how seriously he took safety in the flight stuff. He talks about some incidents that happened on the small airport where he learned, where some people died over decisions they made, and how he tore apart those decisions from the beginning, not in a like judgmental way, but like anytime an incident happened or there was some lesson to be learned, he absolutely likes to dig into it. He served a bunch of time on a safety board for airplanes, so like, which is like I think a volunteer thing. He definitely investigated a bunch of crashes during his time on this board, and then he talks quite a bit about some pilots he knew and that were test pilots that lost their lives, as well as some Navy pilots who lost their lives, and how it's interesting that pilots tend to want to not eject, especially Navy pilots, because they're worried about the price of the plane.
Plane is very valuable, yeah.
And that decision often leads to huge problems. And one of his friends who did survive an ejection was talking about how he thought he had a whole bunch more time, and then he found out he actually ejected like 300 feet from the ground.
Oh God.
And it did live. The other piece that stuck out to me of the book was he had met the first officer and they had been flying for a few days. So Nathan Fielder makes it seem like they just met or that pilots and co-pilots just meet each other, which is true. They don't really meet each other until that first flight. But he had been flying. They basically had a leg of flights that they do. And so they were on like a leg. This was the last or second to last flight on the leg of their journeys together. He does talk about the co-pilot quite a bit. He seems like a pretty cool guy as well. His name was Jeff, I believe. He had a lot of experience, but not nearly as much as Sully did, because he has quite a bit. He's been flying since the 50s, I think he said. And then the other piece that really stuck out to me was the amount of stuff that was going through his head during all of it. He talked like, I think the whole thing from the bird strike to when they landed was like 3.5 minutes. And the amount of thought process that went through his head and all the things he was thinking about was a lot. But all in all, I would recommend it. I don't think it's like it's not like a literary masterpiece, but I think he's an interesting character. It's very apt to what we're talking about on this season of The Rehearsal. And he didn't waste a whole bunch of time being like, oh, you want to hear everything about me for 400 pages or 900 pages. He just almost everything that he was in the book, and he had a co-writer to help him with it, was very designed to come back to the landing.
Yeah, because that's the only... Did you watch the movie?
I have not seen the film. The movie film starring Jonathan Hanks,
America's Dad. Did
and Thank You for Smoking.
Did Sully ever talk about his current relationship with birds in general? Does he carry a grudge, or worse, a vendetta?
I don't think he does, but he did talk about... So it turns out it was a flock of Canadian geese.
Oh.
They were going, I want to say 50 miles an hour, which when you're doing 350, he said it seemed like they were standing absolutely still.
The geese were flying at 50 miles?
Yeah, which also surprised me, but yeah, they can haul.
Is that that's got to be a wind factor, I would think.
They're probably, I'm sure there is some wind factor to that. They, I believe you said they have up to a 6-foot wingspan. So these are big mofos. He did talk a little bit how they test bird strikes, which is hilarious because I think I had some friends who worked on some of that where they literally huck frozen birds at planes out of a cannon. One thing he mentioned is he probably should have ducked just in case something went through the windshield. And he did not have very much time to react from when he noticed the birds to when they hit the plane. And when they were going with the NTSB, they were going through all of the black box, the recorder. You could hear the birds hit the plane pretty clearly when they started smacking the plane. And it's super rare for 2 engines to go down like they did, but they both basically ate themselves alive. And he talks a lot about talking to the air traffic controller, who really didn't want them to land in the Hudson. Not in a like he's trying to convince him otherwise, but he kept giving him options of like places he could maybe go,
like fields.
But that's the thing;
they're in things like that.
They're flying out of, I want to say LaGuardia. I think it's LaGuardia, but they were talking to Newark, I think, at the time. And there's nothing there. Like, they're going down fast. So, yes, normally they would try and pitch it over a grass field. Or in Texas, sections of the highway are built for that don't have a median in the middle, and they can actually land on those. But in Manhattan, that was not going to happen. One of the thoughts that I thought was very interesting is he was thinking, if I did make it out to one of this regional airport that they did call out, he was thinking about how long it would take emergency services to get there versus if he landed it in the Hudson. And he was thinking like he's right, like literally on the water from fire stations and medics and things like that, which I thought was kind of the part of like where I was a little amazed by how much processing he was able to do in like 3.5 minutes to think about all the different things. I think the only thing he said he may have done wrong is the tail hit a little harder than he wanted it to. And so there was some pretty hefty damage to the back of the plane that I think injured a couple of people. But other than that, he pretty much nailed how you'd want to do a water flight, which is a very difficult thing to do without engines.
Well, good for him and good for you for doing the work.
So the Ep4, as you said, probably the most straightforward Ep.
A little bit of a come down Ep. Very reminiscent of season 1.
Did the singing competition come back?
Briefly. Briefly. So I was thinking about where this fits in the overall season, because the first Ep was really him getting us acquainted with the idea of
airplane safety.
He's going to rehearse plane crashes and the laugh fest that was. And then episode 2, we go right into Wings of Voice, or whatever it's called.
That's episode 3. We're on 4.
No, that was 2. Episode
Wings of the Voice was 2?
Was Sully.
Yeah, Wings of Voice and Sully are the same episode.
No, Sully is cloning. Dog cloning.
Oh, that's right.
Sully.
Wow, so Wings of a Voice.
Wings of Voice and
Paramount is
Plus
Nazis
was
were episode 2. Okay, wow.
So from a narrative standpoint, from a velocity standpoint, episode 1, we're trying to figure out what in the hell is going on. And I'm sure if we watched that back, we would think that was much funnier than we did at the time, as we're just trying to get our bearings in episode 1.
Yes.
Episode 2 was an all-timer, as far as I'm concerned. Just
absolutely bonkers.
Pitch perfect, hilarious ep that now we're oriented. Now we can get the jokes. Now everything's landing, and the sheer scale of what he's attempting compared to the previous stuff we've watched, it's miles different. Culminating, I think, with him showing Paramount Plus as a bunch of Nazis. Then we do the Sully thing, which my biggest belly laugh in years in a show. The cloning plus Sully. So this episode was definitely a toned down ep.
I still think my favorite thing was that he did bring back Wings of Voice. There were a couple great jokes with that where he was like, 51 of you will be eliminated tonight, which is, pitch perfect to every singing competition where they're like, 2 of you are going home tonight. And it was just I think it was everybody but one.
Call back to the judge who couldn't eliminate anybody.
Yeah.
I kind of figured it was that contingent that was first on the chopping block.
They all sang Amazing Grace in different styles. He had a 90s pop punk group. He had a hip hop group. He had a R&B group. It was
like the bit that Jimmy Fallon will do.
Yeah.
His little spin the wheel and you get a...
Yeah. You also read an article from someone who was on the singing competition and was a little upset about the whole thing, which I understand.
Yeah, she did a little complaint because she alleges that she spent $5,000 on travel, on getting ready for the singing competition, and then as she's going around the singing competition, talking to various people, she puts it all together that they've all worked with Nathan Fielder in the past. I'm not sure how. I can't name a single stagehand that's worked with Nathan Fielder, but I'm not balls deep in the scene, so of course I wouldn't. And she was a little bit upset about being taken for a little bit of a joke
Well,
there and wasting.
I find that slightly interesting because it also in that article didn't it say that the people were picked for this because they were rejects from another singing competition that was related, and so it makes me think that they were probably pretty prepared for that already. I do think that they were pretty mild about it. They seemed upset, but they also were like, this is a weird business. She said, I think he's kind of a genius. But it was an interesting take to hear.
The joke is not on.
I don't feel like they are the butt of the joke, which is what they said. I don't think that's what the joke is, but I could understand feeling that way, especially when it is something that you are serious about.
Yeah, it's very hard. You're pursuing a dream in this business we call show, and you think you got a good lead on something, spend all this money. Yeah, I could understand her being a little bit upset.
All right, so singing competition ends for the most part. Actually, it hasn't ended. I think it's coming back. We got to find out who won at some point, because I believe he does say he's basically legally obligated to finish this. I think he said morally. He's morally obligated to like play it out. He's handed people golden tickets. He's got to bring them back. He's got to do this whole thing. And he shoots this singing competition in the Houston airport that he's recreated in LA, which is still to this day so phenomenal whenever I see that set. I loved when he brought the NTSB, the old head of the NTSB, in to see it. And I love how seriously that dude takes safety. And he's like, hey, if you want to help with this stuff, like, I'll help you. They explain, like, this also has to be entertaining. And he's like, I get it. That's what gets the views. But he's like, if you like, I'm very serious about airline safety. And if you want to help that, then like, I'm here to help. What else happened this ep?
Well, then he goes right into taking a special attention to Colin. Who?
That's right. This was the dating app.
This was the dating app. Colin would love to find love, but he may have some social awkwardness, maybe some fear of rejection, interaction. Oh, who knows what's in that special sauce?
Colin is one of the first mates, or sorry, the first officer. He is a judge on the show, and by he I don't mean Colin, I mean our boy Nathan, hires a bunch of essentially therapists to play the different people shooting these episodes so that they can one-on-one talk to these pilots to basically try and get how they feel about things out. Like, they're basically undercover therapists for all of these first officers, and he finds that Colin is very quiet and doesn't talk much, and he mentions how he's not very successful in relationships. And so Nathan kind of takes him under his wing.
He wants to get this boy laid, or at least at a minimum kissed, smooched.
He wants to make him more confident in relationship, and he starts this by what he calls the pack theory. Which is he hires, 15 actors to dress up like Colin, sans the zip pants, which is a very important note on my part. And they mimic everything he does on a date that he has with another actor. And he makes a small coffee shop, which was the smallest date, or the smallest set I think he's done to date. It had a kind of a hanging door. Usually he must have ran out of budget, or he knew he wasn't going to use the coffee shop very much. So he basically makes a small little coffee shop and has them go on like a date. And Colin gets like 20 people with him, and they just repeat and mimic everything he does. And this is supposed to like give him some
confidence,
and some reinforcement.
Yeah.
And then this twists to Nathan starts asking all the actors if they like Colin.
If they'd like to smooch him. Because who better to get smooches from than somebody who's really very close? And there's three.
And he takes those three to his bar set, and talks more about it, and kind of plants the seed and I believe he says the game is afoot, which he says I think twice in the episode, a couple of times.
Yeah, two of these are what appear to be age appropriate. Close your eyes, imagine a potential match in this scenario, and you'd have that. One is quite a bit older,
a little bit older, and
and
amazing,
extremely sexually attracted to Albert Einstein.
The best character that's been on a Nathan Fillion show to
Just
date.
absolutely tremendous.
You know,
stuff coming out of her.
I think you should leave the older guy in the car episode where they're doing the car workshop.
Yeah. He was a steering wheel. He doesn't fly off.
Fly off when you're driving.
Yeah.
That's how I think of this character. Where I'm like, this person out of nowhere is just the most amazing, like, magnetic character you've ever seen. And it's too bad that Nathan at this time has not like found what to do with that yet. I'm guessing she's just going to be his entire next show. But one of the characters does kind of fall for Colin, and they do go on some dates.
Mm-hmm.
They don't kiss.
No. Yet
To figure, and because this is the rehearsal, Nathan gets several actors to shadow Colin unknowingly to find out who he is and ask questions about him. Gets another set of actors to follow this other nice lady. Do you remember her name?
I do not.
I don't know why it upsets me that I don't remember it. And then he creates like 5 or 6 rooms for each couple of actors and puts them in those rooms to basically rehearse their life together and how it could go in different directions. Yeah. And then it gets into that a little bit more. He gets the significant others of the actors to watch
to see if they're okay with.
He's very weirded out by their
kissing
and making out, and I don't think anything's really come of that quite yet, but it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. And then eventually he gets Colin and his date, his potential girlfriend, to act out a scene where they're superheroes, and his superpower is always getting a kiss at the end of the date. I forget what her superpower was.
And does he get one?
He does. I believe he gets a couple, which I just wonder, now is he confident enough, though, outside of this? Which is, I think that's where we left off.
Well, we left off confusingly with Nathan getting ready to go to Congress.
Oh, that's right. He starts to rehearse his conversation with Congress. He's built his Congress set.
That's kind of like the end stinger.
He's walking in. He's sat down. He's pulling out his papers. He says, "Excuse me," and then we go to black.
This was a hilarious episode. A little bit of a narrative come down, but still incredibly hilarious, incredibly fun to watch. I was thinking a lot about it seemed to me a little bit like a love letter to neurodivergent people.
Sure.
In this app. The funniest thing about bringing Wings of Voice back was him saying, I was getting pretty bored with it. I wanted to do something else.
I didn't want to keep doing this, but
this is in my limited experience with friends that I know and literature that they've had books that I've read about this subject is highly common.
Yeah.
For neurodivergent people to get intensely focused on something, pour all of their effort into it, and then like a week later just abandon it for something else.
I don't want to paint minifigures anymore.
So him just building this incredibly elaborate singing competition, going, I want to do something else. And then falling for Colin, who I really think, he's having some fun with Colin, of course, but he's really treating him incredibly kindly. Compared to, for example, our pilot that doesn't want to date T-girls and got kicked off all the dating sites.
I was gonna contrast it to him as well. I find Colin fascinating. Period. And I mentioned that to you while we were watching. It's always interesting when you just find out more about normal people, and you're like, "Wow, I thought that person was going to be super boring," and then you just find out that like he's into Irish dance and Irish folk music, and like you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Having read Sully's book, I do see some comparisons to Sully and Colin in this way of like, I don't think most pilots are neurotypical. It'd be interesting to see the actual studies behind that, but I think there is something to, like Sully talks about, he doesn't cry almost ever. He's like, the closest ever was when they adopted their first kid, and then when they adopted their second one, but that's just like not a reaction he has. It doesn't mean he's not an emotional person. It's just that like he can compartmentalize it super well, and I think that's required in certain moments of being a pilot. And so I find Colin very fascinating. I think he's a great character. What I wonder is if this has been, compared to the last season, the most focused I have seen. Like between the two, this season is more focused. It goes wild, but it always keeps coming back to the airplane safety thing. Whereas the first season went off the rails episode 3, and then he just followed that tangent that he was on.
I generally agree with you, but I do think this had nothing to do with airplane safety. I think
At the beginning?
this episode
No,
4.
I don't think it did, and I think he let it wander, but like if this was season 1, he would just drop the airline safety thing completely, and it would just be about Colin.
Yes, agree.
And this one, he's like, and I have to come back to like this thing because it's all about this thing. And I think he is going to somewhat bring it back, but there's a little bit of a connection in that it's very much, there is a fear of rejection that comes from the first officer trying to speak up to a superior or someone of power. It's I think it's a loose link, but he was talking about it, and he was at least bringing it back to that. He obviously shot a bunch of other stuff because there was a scene with our first officer who's been kicked off of every website and our female pilot who's the best at saying no to people. Or sorry, the male was not a first officer. He was a pilot.
He's a pilot.
She's the first officer. And they had the packs in the cockpit with them. We didn't get to hear what they were saying, or I'm assuming we'll go back to that more, but he definitely shot a whole bunch of stuff that did not make this up. And now we're going to Congress.
And what an ep that'll be.
I'm excited. Well,
you know what I want everyone to do? Stay gold.
good.